Well, today the U.S. marked its 3 millionth Wu flu case, and I don't think that I've even really discussed this whole situation with the virus since we were at something like 100,000. Maybe it hasn't been that long, but that was back when I was covering it, very heavily and talking about it every day. And since then, I've backed off. I've talked about it hardly at all because, frankly, I think that we had gotten into a period where it stabilized. Psychologically or sociologically, and that there wasn't much point in talking about it because I felt like sort of what was happening had come to pass, and there wasn't really anything new to talk about. And now I would say that enough time has passed to where I can update sort of my thoughts on the whole situation. Obviously, it has not gone away. The situation is still very active. The virus is still a big deal. It's not something that just went poof and goodbye like that whole Ebola scare we had a few years ago. Quite obviously, but at the same time, the very dire fears that a lot of us had back in January when we first started talking about this, learning about this when we didn't know what was going on. Those thankfully have not come to pass. Things are not nearly as bad as a lot of us thought that they could be. Nevertheless, a lot of people are still dying of this virus, and they're going to continue dying of this virus. The thing is that not a lot of people, really want to acknowledge is that, there is no easy solution to this. It's not just like, oh, if everybody wears a mask, then nobody's going to die. Still, a lot of people are going to die, marginally, of course. If you are not spreading it as much and not as many people are getting it, sure, less people are going to die, definitely. But that doesn't eliminate the problem. It's still not going to be as good as, if the virus didn't exist at all. Even if you take all these measures, we're still going to have a pretty big, pile of bodies at the end of the day. And this is essentially something that people just have to learn to live with. The fact that, this is something that a lot of people are going to die of. It's not a happy thought. It's not something that a lot of people want to focus on, but it's reality. And above anything, it's an apolitical reality. I hope that eventually, over time, things can get back to the way they were back in January, at least with the small group of us who were concerned about this virus. I'm thinking people like, me, Chris Martenson, Mr. Mediocre, when there was just a handful of people on the internet talking about this, the people who were called conspiracy theorists for even worrying about it. None of us thought of this as a political issue. We thought of it entirely of human lives. And I hope that, we're able to get to a point where people realize that this is simply, an act of God that nobody really is responsible for or can prevent. If Joe Biden is elected in November, the virus doesn't go poof and disappear. Beyond that, however, the realization that, which is something that Wall Street certainly has not come to terms to, that this is a long-term problem, that this is something that is not going away, that this is, an issue that is going to be affecting the public for a long time. This does not bode well for all of these hyper-optimistic, economic forecasters. The folks who are predicting V-shaped recovery, who think that, we've already experienced the recession and we're heading back to boom time again. The fact of the matter is that the recession was stalled. The decline was stalled by the Fed, pumping the whole system full of money. I've been over this time and time again. I won't explain it in depth here. You can look up, any of my videos or anybody else who's talked about this issue at length, but the Fed has inflated asset prices and has kept a lot of the economy from coming unglued. They did so, however, in an artificial manner, in something that is, can be sustained temporarily. Given the absurd amount of money that they're throwing at the system, it's not something that we would think would last forever, although this is a great experiment for that, because the virus, like I said, is not such a short-term, 1 or 2 month event. This is a multi-year event, it looks like it's going to be. I don't know how many years, certainly more than a year, I think. But that, puts into question, Will the Fed be able to sustain their onslaught for that long? Or will the virus finally break through? Will the fundamentals finally defeat Fed liquidity? And the longer this virus sticks around, the longer businesses have to remain closed, the longer that people, don't patronize businesses because they're concerned about getting sick, the longer that, folks order everything off of Amazon and don't want to go shop at retailers. This has an impact on our economy. And, it should impact asset prices. It's easy for us to say that the longer that the Fed's con goes on, that the more absurd it becomes. But, if nobody in the market recognizes that, or at least if not everybody, because, of course, there are plenty of people who recognize that and sell out of the market. The signifier here is that the important thing here is that the Fed is able to make up for the sellers by driving more people into the market. The Fed, for every person who, throws up their hands and says, I'm out, this is nuts, I'm not doing what the Fed says anymore, the Fed is able to drive in enough liquidity to not only make up for the loss of that person selling, but drive the price ever more high. But at what point does the absurdity reach a critical mass to where the mainstream, all of the mainstream, not just some of the mainstream, not just the smart money, but even the dumb money says, you know what, we've had it, and there is no value here. We're going to take our, profits, and we're going to get the hell out of this market. That's why the number one party who should be concerned about these virus numbers and the fact that they don't seem to be declining, but rather still setting new records. Even in the middle of summer, when we were hoping, that, maybe the heat will make it harder to spread the virus. That was a meme very early on, was that, maybe, this happens with other viruses. In the summer, they go away for a while. Well, not only does that not seem to be the case, we're setting new records in the hottest states in the country in the summer. And this has real impacts, okay? People dying, people being put in the hospital. This takes labor out of the economy. These are folks who can't work. And, when that creates imbalances in the economy. All of these businesses being closed, that's not nothing. Monetary heroin can only cover up this pain for so long. Even if you don't feel the pain, the underlying damage is still, being wrought. Morphine can make the pain from your cancer go away, but it cannot cure the cancer itself. You're still going to die. And so even if you go the whole time of the of your illness when you have cancer or anything else that causes pain, and you're just, you're on that morphine drip and you don't feel a thing, well, all of a sudden, you're going to feel real bad real quick because finally, your body's going to shut down and there's going to be a sudden collapse. That's what's happening to us now. When the Fed refuses to let the market sell off, when it refuses to let Wall Street bleed, they're not saving them in the long run. This damage is being done, and it will only be felt later. And that, of course, is when the real depression will begin. We're not in the depression yet. I said a few months ago when all these layoffs were happening, looks like the depression's here. It really hasn't set in yet. This is wave one of the depression, and I think I was talking about in a video before about, the second wave of the depression. And trying to tie that to the second wave of the virus. And frankly, no matter how bad the virus gets, it doesn't really matter until Wall Street recognizes it. The folks on Wall Street have no pain receptors. They have no idea that they've been hit until they look down and see a hole in their foot. So not only, in order for things to really get bad, for the real depression to happen, does the virus have to stick around, but Wall Street has to realize that the virus is not going away. And who knows if that'll ever happen. The Fed, at this point, maybe they will be able to kick the can down the road another 5 years. I have no idea. This has never been tried before. I'm done trying to make grand predictions. I was never very big on it anyway. I always thought that the guys that made grand predictions always looked really dumb when they were wrong, because even when they make the prediction, they have no way of knowing for certain anyway. They're just sort of sticking their neck out there for nothing. So with that said, if you gained anything of value out of this video, I'd appreciate you clicking that like button and sharing this video. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe, because I do upload every day and I'd hate to have you miss one. So I'll see you folks back here tomorrow.